Hey everyone, it's time for the most played games on Steam Deck for October 2024. This is by hours played, published by Valve, so let's dive in. If you like the stats that you see, check out the SDG Companion App on the iOS and Android App Store. In at number 20 is Dave the Diver. Dive into the deep blue by day and run a sushi restaurant by night at a solid 60 frames per second on the Steam Deck, pushing only around 10 to 11 watts, meaning you're going to get around 5 hours gameplay on the OLED and about 2.5 to 3 hours on the LCD as well, running at pretty solid 60 since all of the latest updates. In at number 19, down a massive 7 places, is Deep Rock Galactic Survivor. Deep Rock's entry into the time survival mechanics certainly does well. Doesn't quite hit 90 on the OLED though, so good 60 cap is where you want to be with this one, but pushing a good 22 watts, meaning you're only going to get around 2.5 hours on the OLED and about an hour to an hour and a half on the LCD, so do be aware of that one. Does look absolutely gorgeous though. At number 18, down 3 places, is the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim Special Edition. Running absolutely gorgeous on the Steam Deck with our recommended settings between 40 and 60 frames per second, depending on how big a battle you are having with a dragon, but otherwise playing and looking absolutely awesome. You can get this at 60 if you lower the settings, but we just love having high where we can. Pushing 22 watts though, again only around 2 hours gameplay at best, but still well worth it, especially with mods. First of our new entries at number 17 of TCG Card Shop Simulator, and I should give you a warning with this one, especially if you are a loot box fan. This will certainly scratch that itch, as well as if you want some Pokemon trading cards as well. You can end up spending hours opening packs or just sell them, especially as you're only pushing around 11 to 12 watts, meaning you're going to get a good 4 to 5 hours easy on the OLED and about 3 hours on the LCD, but if you plug in your power, you are going to melt that time away, playing at a very solid 60 frames per second. Re-entry at number 16 with Halls of Torment, a pixel art style retro time survival. Certainly made its comeback with Vampire Survivors and some of the others, running at a super stable 60 frames per second now after a few of the updates, and only pushing around 7 watts, meaning your timed runs will be pushing you over the 5 to 6 hour mark on the OLED and around 3.5 to 4 hours on the LCD. Dropping 5 places but still firmly in the top 20 is Slay the Spire. Another very easy to run game on the deck, pushing 60 frames per second solid with only around 7 watts usage. This card builder certainly keeps a lot of people entertained with your random treks up the spire as well as their daily quests, which is what keeps people coming back more and more. Down 3 places to number 14 is Red Dead Redemption 2, and I fully expect to see the original remaster in the charts next month. Well, that is if they put it on sale anyway, but it certainly is worth it. Red Dead Redemption 2 though is still pushing a good 40 frames per second with decent settings. We do have a full video guide on this, but it does push 23 watts, so you aren't going to be spending a lot of time on this without power. But it's still highly recommended. Just watch out for the 4 gig UMA causing issues around water. Black Myth Wukong has dropped a massive 13 spaces off the top spot, but still going strong on the Steam Deck. Although it's officially unsupported, people are obviously still playing this quite a lot, and it is still worth it, but you will struggle to hold that 30 frames per second a lot of the time. But if you can stomach the dips, it's definitely worth playing on the Steam Deck. It's just an awesome game all round. Dropping another 5 places to number 12 is Cyberpunk 2077. So one of my favourite games and definitely a good one on deck as long as you don't venture too much around Dogtown. Pushing a decent 40 to 50 frames per second out in the outside world, but only around 30 with a bit of a struggle in Dogtown, which is a bit of a shame. But if you're not that interested in the DLC, have an absolute blast on this one on the OLED or the LCD. Also dropping 5 spots to number 11 is Hogwarts Legacy. Still officially verified, although really it should only be playable. It does play very well outside of towns, but still struggles around the 30 mark when we hit Hogsmeade and also some areas around Hogwarts as well. Overall though, still playing great, pushing 23 watts though, meaning you're only going to get about 2 to 2.5 hours on the OLED and around an hour on the LCD. First time dropping outside of the top 5 is Elden Ring, down 6 places to number 10. Still absolutely gorgeous on the Steam Deck though, and multiplayer is still functional, but only expect around 30 to 40 frames per second at best. But it is absolutely gorgeous, and only around 2 hours gameplay on the OLED, about an hour to an hour and a half on the LCD depending on what areas you venture into, but still worth playing on the deck. Up a massive 11 spots though to number 9 is Brotato. Gotta love the time survival games on the Steam Deck, certainly seems to be the more popular genre, and why not, because it's so easy to run. Again, it's had some updates so we can actually push 90 frames per second on the OLED now and 60 on the LCD, with only around 7 watts. You're going to be able to test out each of the different classes to see which will get you the longest run. Our second highest new entry at number 8 is Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Although there are some major issues with the multiplayer on this, as you're only able to play with other Linux or Steam Deck players, making it very few people to match with online, it does still play fantastically well for all of the other modes. Pushing a good 60 frames per second in most scenarios with some dips, but because the rendering is capped to the frames per second, you're not going to want to cap this one below 45 at all. Our highest re-entry is number 7, Hades 2, pushing a super stable 90 frames per second on the OLED and 60 on the LCD with around 12 watts usage. You're going to be able to play through this one very happily. Unfortunately, we've seen Hades drop out of the charts now, but Hades 2 has definitely taken its place for those that wanted something fresh and new. Vampire Survivors is up 2 places at number 6, still the best time survival game, probably because it's one of the originals and constantly getting new DLC and updates. Vampire Survivors is pushing around 7.5 to 8 watts on the OLED deck, and a nice stable 90 frames per second now after a few of the updates, so you'll get 60 frames per second solid on the LCD and around 10 watts usage on the LCD as well. Holding firm at number 5 is Balatro. This is definitely one of those addictive games, but it seems to be stuck at the number 5 spot for the last few weeks. If you're into poker and you want to try something a little bit different, then Balatro is definitely a game for you, especially as it's only around 8 watts usage. You will get 90 frames per second on the OLED and 60 on the LCD, but that's kind of pointless on this game, so you may as well cap it and extend that battery life even further. At number 4, up a massive 10 places, is Diablo IV. I really should dive back into this one with the DLC, but with its mixed reviews, I wasn't too sure whether to have a look. Maybe I'll wait for a sale. Let us know in the comments below if you're playing Diablo IV again, as every time a new season comes out, you have to start again. It's no wonder that this stays in the most played charts pretty much every month. Last time we played this, we were able to push 60 frames per second out in the outside world with about 40 to 50 in towns, but it is fairly hefty on the usage, pushing around 23 watts on the OLED, meaning you're still only going to get around 2 hours on battery. Our highest new entry to the chart this week at number 3 is Metaphor ReFantazio. Absolutely awesome game that deserves more than the playable status that it got. Unfortunately, it doesn't support 12x10 out of the box, but we do have a guide for installing the mod, which will only take you around 5 minutes to get that full 12x10 support. Pushing 60 frames per second with our settings on the OLED, pushing between 18 and 20 watts depending on the battle areas. In battles, 60 frames per second pretty much solid is happy. Occasional dips around town into the 40s and 50s, but well worth playing. At number 2, staying firm from last month, is Baldur's Gate 3. I'm still surprised just how much people are playing on this, especially as in Act 3 it can get a bit of a chugfest around Baldur's Gate and Riverton, but when we are through some of the more instance areas and away from the main town, 30 frames per second capped is very easily doable without it looking like an absolute pixel fest. Let us know how far you've got in Baldur's Gate 3 in the comments below. Back up 2 spots though, reclaiming the number 1 spot is Stardew Valley. No surprises here, as it's been in the charts since the beginning and constantly hits the top 3 pretty much every single month. I believe there's been another update to this which has pushed it back up to the number 1 spot and only around 6 watts usage, meaning you're going to get around 8 hours gameplay on the OLED and about 3 to 4 on the LCD. So I think the battery life is winning the playtime on this one, so that should be a lesson to publishers out there that the more efficient the game is on battery, the higher your chances are in the monthly playlists. Let us know in the comments below if you've been playing any of these most played or what your most played game has been this month. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.